Characters and setting. The Smith family, in New York. Nestled in the picturesque suburbs just outside of New York City, the Smith family lives in a classic two-story colonial home at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. Their neighborhood is the kind often featured in lifestyle magazines. Picket fences, neatly manicured lawns, and children's laughter echoing from nearby yards. Autumn leaves gently carpet the sidewalks, and friendly neighbors wave hello on morning walks. The Smiths fit seamlessly into this seemingly perfect American landscape. Emily Smith, the heart of the family, is known for her gentle demeanor and warmth. She is a devoted wife and a loving mother, often involved in community events or volunteering at her son's elementary school. Emily's warmth extends to everyone she meets. She's the neighbor who bakes cookies for block parties and the friend others call during tough times. Her sense of responsibility and empathy is second nature, making her widely respected in the community. John Smith, Emily's husband, works as a senior executive for a Manhattan-based finance company. Ambitious, charismatic, and outwardly devoted to his family, John has cultivated an image of the quintessential American success story. His days are a blur of business meetings, charity functions, and, when he finds time, coaching his son's Little League baseball team on weekends. To most, John is the model husband and father, hardworking, dependable, and generous. Their son, Ethan, is a curious and energetic 7-year-old. Bright-eyed and endlessly enthusiastic, Ethan spends his afternoons riding his bike with friends and asking questions about everything from how rainbows form to why leaves change color. The Smith home is filled with his drawings, science experiments, and the clatter of Lego bricks. A unique fixture in their household is Jessica Miller, Emily's childhood friend. Jessica, recently divorced and living nearby, often assists Emily with errands and even occasional babysitting. Her presence in the Smith home seems entirely natural. She joins family dinners, helps prepare for holiday festivities, and is known by neighbors as practically part of the family. Jessica and Emily share a history going back to high school. Their friendship marked by deep trust and countless adventures. The Smiths' daily life is woven with routines: Sunday morning pancakes, autumn trips to pumpkin patches, and movie nights with bowls of popcorn. On the surface, their story is the embodiment of the American dream: stability, affection, and connection. Yet, beneath this carefully cultivated exterior, subtle tensions and hidden truths linger in quiet moments, foreshadowing the dramatic events about to unfold. A painful discovery, infidelity during the family vacation. Thanksgiving in the Smith household was always an eagerly anticipated event, a cherished tradition marked by laughter, shared gratitude, and memories made against the backdrop of falling leaves and crisp New England air. This year, Emily Smith had planned something truly special for her family and her closest friend, Jessica Miller: a week-long escape to a lakeside resort in Vermont. With its rustic cabins, glistening water, roaring fireplaces, and endless opportunities for outdoor exploration, the trip was meant to strengthen bonds and offer everyone a respite from the demands of their hectic city lives. Emily imagined nothing but happiness ahead. The first few days unfolded almost exactly as Emily had hoped. Mornings began with fresh coffee on the deck. Ethan and John played catch by the lake, while Jessica and Emily swapped stories over mugs steaming in the frosty air. At night, they gathered around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows, trading ghost stories, and taking in the star-drenched sky. Emily allowed herself to believe, for a while, that the coziness of the weekend symbolized the security of her own life. But subtle shifts soon began to intrude upon the picture-perfect scene. Emily noticed whispered conversations between John and Jessica that quieted whenever she entered a room. She brushed aside the odd glances at first, convincing herself it was simply stress or paranoia from planning the complex trip. When John retreated for work calls, far more often than usual, or when Jessica seemed distant during their shared afternoon walks, Emily chose not to pry, trusting in years of friendship and marriage. One chilly evening, after a long day of hiking and laughter, Emily returned to the main lodge to retrieve her phone charger from John's duffel bag. A string of unfamiliar notifications on John's phone screen caught her eye. Texts and social media alerts from an anonymous contact, with brief, cryptic previews that hinted at intimacy and secrecy. A knot formed in Emily's stomach. Risking the pang of betrayal, she scrolled further, her heart pounding as the truth unraveled. Affectionate messages exchanged late at night, secret rendezvous arranged, coded language only two people steeped in illicit passion would understand. Stunned and disoriented, Emily's mind raced. On the outside, she remained composed, years of social graces and personal dignity kicking in, masking the tempest within. She knew she needed certainty, not speculation. That night, while everyone else seemed to be asleep, Emily walked past the living room and glimpsed, through a crack in the doorway, John and Jessica in an unguarded, intimate moment. Laughter too close, hands brushing where they shouldn't. An atmosphere electric with unspoken confession. The sight was a dagger, cold and precise, confirming her worst fears. Alone in her guest room, Emily stared at the ceiling as the sounds of the Vermont night echoed outside. She replayed every conversation, every shared look between John and Jessica, tracing back signs she might have missed. The shock mingled with heartbreak, anger, and a deep sense of violation, not just by her husband, but by the woman she had called her dearest friend. Yet as dawn approached, grief gradually stiffened into resolve. Emily decided that this betrayal would not destroy her spirit. Instead, it would become the turning point for a new, quietly powerful chapter in her life. Remarkable composure, the revenge plan. The morning after that shattering discovery, Emily lay in bed, her eyes wide open long before the faint Vermont sunrise crept through lace curtains. The world was silent, except for the soft breathing of Ethan in the adjacent room and the hum of the old heater. Her mind felt hollow, echoing with disbelief and grief. But somewhere, deep beneath the confusion, a quiet clarity was taking root, a calm, cold resolve. Emily's response was not what many would expect. She didn't confront John or Jessica in a storm of accusations. She didn't allow herself the luxury of uncontrollable tears or theatrical scenes. Instead, she chose something infinitely more daunting: composure. The composure of a woman who understood that, if she acted hastily, she would lose control of the narrative and the outcome. Emily realized that if she was to reclaim her dignity, her future, she needed not only evidence, but absolute patience and strategy, a study in self-control. In the days following the vacation, as they packed up, drove home, and attempted to resume their everyday lives in New York, Emily wore a mask of calm. She continued her routines, making breakfast, kissing Ethan goodbye before school, asking John about his day when he returned late from work. Inside, though, Emily was cataloging everything. The lingering scent of Jessica's perfume in their living room, John's new habit of setting his phone face down during dinner, the way Jessica's eyes didn't quite meet hers anymore on neighborhood
This is where
walks.
we found the evidence.
Emily devoured articles and podcasts on private investigation, legal rights, and methods of gathering admissible evidence without tipping off her husband. She consulted discreetly with a divorce attorney, a woman recommended by a friend who had endured a similar ordeal, about the laws that would govern custody, assets, and fault. Emily's first lesson from the attorney: document everything, but do so quietly. The art of listening, watching, waiting. She began by attuning herself to the minor, but telling details of her daily life. Each time John claimed to be working late, Emily made a note of it, cross-referencing with Jessica's mysterious absences from weekly yoga classes or community events. When Jessica offered to babysit Ethan so Emily could have some time to herself, Emily declined with polite excuses. She needed all the threads in her hands. Emily knew her home, her routines, and her relationships better than anyone. She realized her greatest advantage lay in being underestimated. To both John and Jessica, she remained the trusting wife and loyal friend. To those watching from outside, she was nothing but gracious and involved, the very picture of suburban stability. Inside, however, she was a chess player, setting the board. Evidence, not accusation. Her first real step was technological. With the help of a tech-savvy cousin, Emily learned to install a discreet, voice-activated recorder in the pocket of John's favorite jacket, and later, beneath a cushion on the living room couch. She kept her own phone on record during certain family meals, her composure never faltering, even as she captured snippets of suspicious conversations and inside jokes that were not meant for her ears. Next, she silently synchronized John's phone contacts and cloud backup with her laptop. It was tedious and nerve-wracking work done in the dead of night, but it gave her access to unfamiliar call logs, messages with coded language, and calendar entries that coincided suspiciously with Jessica's visits. Emily never felt comfortable invading someone's privacy, least of all the privacy of her own husband and best friend. But her attorney's advice echoed in her mind. You're protecting your son. You're protecting your future. So she persisted, storing each screenshot and audio file carefully, backing up to more than one hard drive, using encrypted folders. She never consumed the evidence in one sitting, fearing it might overwhelm her, stir up vengeful rage that would prompt rash action. Instead, she would review a bit at a time, steadily building her case. Observing the co-conspirator, Jessica's role demanded particular scrutiny. Emily paid close attention to her friends' mannerisms. Jessica stopped sharing stories about her dating life, and their laughter felt forced, hollow echoes of genuine friendship. At social gatherings, Jessica would initiate conversations with John at odd times or offer to help him in the kitchen. Emily participated in these moments as if nothing were wrong, asking Jessica if she'd like more wine, pretending to admire their shared jokes, while mentally pinning every odd glance, every touch that lingered just a half-second too long. Emily started declining Jessica's invitations to coffee or shopping, instead suggesting group events or including other neighborhood friends in the mix. She also kept close tabs on Ethan, ensuring her son was never exposed to the tension simmering beneath the surface. Above all, Emily wanted to make sure her little boy felt safe, loved, and protected. A subtle shift in power. Internally, Emily changed. She stopped replaying what-ifs in her mind and lunging between humiliation and outrage. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her actions, her evidence, her future. Emily also found solace in small routines: long runs in the park, journaling at night, and hours spent reading classic novels that returned her to a world where wrongs were always righted, where goodness inevitably triumphed. She confided in no one directly except her attorney and, cautiously, her cousin. Emily learned to be her own support system, drawing strength from the knowledge that, while she could not undo the betrayal, she could absolutely determine where the story went from here. Preparation for what lay ahead. Over the ensuing weeks, Emily's plan became more detailed. She created a calendar marking John's deviations from his regular routines and matched them with Jessica's absences. She assembled witness statements, neighbors' casual remarks about seeing Jessica's car in their driveway at odd hours, Ethan's unfiltered observations about Daddy and Aunt Jessica talking in the kitchen with the door closed. Emily drafted emails to her attorney, summarizing each piece of evidence, securely transmitting recordings, timestamps, and transcripts. She inquired discreetly about asset protection, learning what paperwork John might try to move or conceal. Though she prayed it would never come to a court battle, Emily wanted to be ready for every possible outcome. At home, the Smiths' life continued as usual, at least on the surface. Emily and John hosted dinner parties, attended Ethan's school events, posed for family photos at fall harvest festivals. But within Emily, a fire burned steadily. A fire not fueled by revenge alone, but by the fundamental desire to reclaim her self-respect and her future. Every decision Emily made, from the smallest act of kindness to the shrewdest bit of evidence gathering, was done with a calm purposefulness. She understood that explosive confrontations rarely favor the betrayed. Patience and methodical preparation, though quiet and often invisible, carried the real power. The calm before the storm. That autumn was one of the strangest in Emily's life. Outwardly as beautiful as ever, inwardly an extraordinary test of will. Neighbors complimented her on her resilience and positivity, not suspecting the drama unfolding behind closed doors. Emily's own mother admired her grace under pressure, never imagining that her daughter was mounting the most critical battle of her life. Each night before bed, Emily would stare at the ceiling, as she had that first night in Vermont, and tell herself, "I will decide when and how this ends." And as the weeks turned to months, that calm, unwavering determination only grew stronger. A quiet storm, biding its time before all illusions shattered. The psychological battle, facing the lies. For weeks after the family returned from Vermont, Emily moved through each day as if treading water, calm on the surface, turbulent underneath. The house in the New York suburbs, which had once radiated warmth and security, now felt subtly charged. The walls, the pictures, the familiar scent of morning coffee, and even the rhythmic hum of Ethan playing in the den became a backdrop for a silent, relentless duel of minds. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It had become a trial of endurance and wits between Emily and both John and Jessica, even though neither of them realized the battle lines had been drawn. An unspoken war. Each morning, Emily greeted her husband with the same gentle smile, poured his coffee, and asked about his day as she always had. Across the kitchen table, John would recite stories from work, eyes betraying nothing, moving through the script of a loving husband with practiced ease. When Jessica dropped by to return a dish or help organize a neighborhood event, she'd share quiet laughter with John and exchange polite small talk with Emily. The choreography was flawless, but Emily saw the cracks. She noticed the brief silences when she entered a room, the sudden movement of a phone from table to pocket, the strained attempts at normal conversation. She recognized the forced cheerfulness that masked tension and guilt. The effort her former best friend put into maintaining appearances was impressive, but it only made Emily more resolute. It was a theater of politeness, hiding a network of secrets. Inside Emily's mind. For Emily, every encounter became an exercise in control. She felt two conflicting forces within herself. One, the injured woman, burning with anger and humiliation. The other, a strategist, cool and determined. There were moments when the pain threatened to overwhelm her, glimpsing John and Jessica share a private smile, remembering past years when she had confided in Jessica about marital anxieties, only to realize that all trust had been exploited. Yet, each pang of heartbreak was channeled into mental discipline. Emily reminded herself that losing her composure would only erode her strength. She reread articles and book chapters on emotional intelligence and studied how to manage her expressions, breathing, and speech. At night, she journaled exhaustively, putting her swirl of emotions and suspicions onto paper so she could maintain her mask by day. She also doubled down on self-care, not out of vanity, but as a means to stay resilient. Morning runs, meditation, and time spent guiding Ethan through his homework became rituals of reclaiming her sense of agency. Where others might have fallen into despair, Emily found purpose, even in the smallest act of control. Interacting with the co-conspirators, interacting with John and Jessica, became equal parts performance and investigation. When John mentioned late meetings, Emily would listen with understanding, but asked gentle, specific questions, noting his responses. When Jessica volunteered to help Emily with household chores or brought over Ethan's favorite cookies, Emily would thank her graciously, studying every facial twitch and word choice. At times, she orchestrated situations to observe their reactions, inviting Jessica to join family dinner at the last minute, changing plans on short notice to see how both John and Jessica adapted. She became skilled at eliciting information without appearing suspicious, casually drawing out details in conversation that she later verified against her growing dossier of evidence. One Friday evening, as the four of them watched a movie, Emily deliberately chose a film about honesty and betrayal. She watched, not the screen, but the subtle glances exchanged between John and Jessica, the nervous laughter, the visible discomfort in certain scenes. Everything was a clue. The burden of secrets, maintaining this facade, was exhausting. Emily carried the emotional weight in private. She found herself unable to sleep some nights, the enormity of it all pressing down on her chest. She worried, not just about her own heartbreak, but for Ethan, whose innocence and routine she wanted fiercely to preserve. Her son's world depended on the illusion of normalcy, at least for now. There were also close calls that nearly rattled her composure. Once, during a neighbor's barbecue, Emily overheard Jessica awkwardly deflect a harmless question about her dating life. Another time, John grew defensive when Emily asked if he wanted to invite Jessica for the holidays, insisting on taking charge of the guest list. Each incident deepened her conviction while reminding her how easily the truth could slip. At her lowest points, Emily yearned to confide in someone. She craved the release that only vulnerable honesty with another human could bring. But she remembered her attorney's warning. Move carefully. Trust is your greatest currency right now. So she resisted temptation and clung to her plan. Shifting the power dynamics gradually, Emily noticed the psychological balance shifting. With every piece of evidence she quietly secured, with every successful act of composure, the trio's dynamic changed. John and Jessica grew incrementally more anxious, their conversations more stilted, their laughter more brittle. The uncertainty about what Emily knew and when she might reveal it, became a silent pressure cooker in their lives. Emily, meanwhile, took small but significant steps to reclaim power. She began scheduling outings with other friends, subtly excluding Jessica. She voiced opinions on finances and family decisions with newfound firmness, causing John to second-guess his own usual authority. At community events and school functions, she maintained her reputation as gracious and confident, while subtly distancing herself from the two people who'd wounded her most. A study in Grace Under Fire. The psychological battle was not one of shouting or confrontation. It was a silent, sustained sparring, a contest of nerves in which Emily refused to be the first to blink. There were days when the fatigue was almost too much. Emily battled tearful moments in locked bathrooms. She prayed for strength and repeated daily affirmations. "I am stronger than this." She found humor in Ethan's antics, surprise beauty in ordinary things, a sunset over maple-lined streets, the scent of fresh-cut grass, and these became her emotional anchors. Through it all, Emily remembered who she was: a mother, a friend, a survivor. She saw clearly that her value did not hinge on John's fidelity or Jessica's loyalty. She was more than this betrayal. This certainty fueled her through the most trying days, anticipating the showdown. All the while, Emily stayed a step ahead. Her attorney assured her that her growing portfolio of evidence would be decisive if things reached court. Emily also started making practical preparations, reviewing the family's finances, organizing important documents, and building her own preparedness for whatever might come next. As autumn in New York slipped toward winter, Emily knew the charade could not last forever. The tension was reaching its peak. She could sense that the psychological battle was nearing its conclusion. A confrontation that would finally strip away the layers of deception. Emily was ready, and for the first time since the moment her world fractured, she felt in control of the story. Striking the decisive blow, Emily's strategy, the emotional storm of betrayal, once raw and paralyzing, had matured into something sharp and cold inside Emily. In the months that followed her return from Vermont, Emily's outward composure belied the relentless, strategic calculations that now shaped her every move. She had spent weeks documenting, observing, journaling, and quietly building not just a case, but the terms under which she would take her power back. Now, with the truth meticulously organized and her resolve solidified, Emily was ready to execute the final act, striking the decisive blow. Assembling the arsenal, Emily knew that, in matters of infidelity and family, evidence was everything. Her attorney's discreet guidance had been invaluable, advising her to move carefully, maintain the status quo, and gather proof that would hold up in court, or, perhaps more importantly, in the court of public opinion. By now, Emily's encrypted files overflowed with screenshots of text messages, time-stamped call logs, and audio recordings of John and Jessica's furtive conversations. There were calendar entries, credit card receipts, and even a few candid photographs, capturing moments of inappropriate affection. What made Emily's approach so formidable was the breadth and subtlety of her evidence. She didn't rely on a single piece of startling proof. She built a comprehensive timeline, demonstrating not just one act of betrayal, but a sustained, coordinated deception. With her cousin's help, she secured digital backups hidden behind multiple layers of passwords, immune to accidental deletion or intentional sabotage. Beyond digital evidence, Emily quietly gathered what lawyers called corroborating context. She noted which neighbors had seen Jessica's car parked outside at odd hours and encouraged casual, documented conversations about it. She made audio memos of Ethan's innocent, offhand remarks about seeing Daddy and Aunt Jessica hugging in the kitchen when no one else was around. Every detail, large and small, was cataloged and cross-referenced, not out of malice, but because she refused to allow doubt or manipulation to distort her story. Anticipating counter-moves, Emily knew that striking first would mean little if she left herself vulnerable. She began working with her attorney to protect her assets, reviewing financial records for suspicious activity, and placing extra scrutiny on joint accounts. She made appointments with her family's accountant and discreetly researched the legal ramifications of separating finances in her state. She even updated her own will, making sure Ethan's future was secure, no matter how John might try to retaliate. Meanwhile, she continued perfecting her performance within the Smith home. She asked John about his day, celebrated neighborhood milestones, showed up at school events, and welcomed Jessica into her home when expected, ensuring that there was never, outwardly, a hint of suspicion or vengeful plotting. But beneath her surface calm, Emily rehearsed her words and actions in preparation for every possible reaction, from weeping remorse to self-righteous denial, knowing that her composure would be her greatest weapon. Choosing the moment, Emily was acutely aware that timing could make or break her plan. She didn't want a confrontation that devolved into private shouting, which could be denied or reinterpreted. She sought a distinctly public, strategic setting, one where John and Jessica would be entirely unprepared, and the exposure of their wrongdoing would be indisputable. Her opportunity arrived with John's upcoming birthday, an event he relished every year, using it as an occasion to reaffirm his status among friends, colleagues, and community members. This year, the Smiths were hosting a lavish party at their home, with nearly every important figure in their social and professional networks invited. Emily poured herself into the planning, ensuring the decorations were perfect, the catering seamless, and the guest list complete. She exuded warmth and excitement, skillfully hiding her true intentions behind the mask of a devoted wife organizing her husband's big night. In the days leading up to the party, Emily coordinated quietly with her attorney and closest family members, warning them that difficult truths might emerge, but requesting their calm support. She prepared all the necessary digital files, summarizing the timeline of the affair and selecting the most damning messages for display on a secure USB drive, as well as hard copies should anything go wrong. Technologically, the night of reckoning. As guests arrived, laughter and music filled the Smiths' home. Emily drifted among the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, watching John bask in the celebration he believed was all about him. Jessica moved through the room with practiced ease, never straying too far from John's orbit, but also careful not to seem conspicuous. The trust everyone placed in the Smith family was palpable. No one could have suspected the tension boiling just beneath the surface. The decisive moment arrived near the end of the evening, after toasts had been made and dessert served. Emily tapped her glass, gathering attention with her signature poise. Before the night ends, she began, her voice steady.
Number 3.
I want to thank everyone for being here, not just for John's birthday, but for all the support you've offered our family over the years. I'd like to share something important with all of you. As the room quieted, Emily connected her laptop to the large screen in the living room. Without dramatics, she began playing a carefully edited collection of images, messages, and audio snips, laying bare the truth in a way that was impossible to ignore or misinterpret. The room fell utterly silent. Eyes flicked to John, whose expression shifted from confusion to horror to utter disbelief. Jessica blanched, fumbled for explanations, but the avalanche of evidence drowned any denial. Emily kept her address brief and dignified. I share this not to destroy, but to make clear. I will not live with lies, nor will I allow my son to learn that deception is tolerable in his family. With those words, Emily walked out, her dignity and self-respect intact, leaving John and Jessica to face the community's stunned condemnation. Aftermath and liberation. The aftermath was swift and seismic. John's reputation in the community and at work suffered irreparable damage. Colleagues and friends who had admired their marriage looked at him with new wariness or disappointment. Jessica, once known as Emily's loyal friend, became an example of betrayal, whispered about at neighborhood gatherings. Emily, however, found herself buoyed by the quiet support of those who admired her grace and courage. Her strategic approach, so unemotional on the surface, resonated deeply with others who recognized the immense strength required to confront such a personal disaster in so public a fashion. Her attorney quickly moved to secure Emily's rights in the divorce proceedings, using the mountain of evidence to ensure Ethan's well-being and Emily's financial security were protected. Most importantly, Emily's son saw his mother as steady, strong, and unwavering. Even in the weeks of turmoil that followed, the structure Emily created, peaceful mornings, honest conversations, and steadfast love, offered Ethan a safe haven as his world changed. A new dawn. With the decisive blow behind her, Emily set about rebuilding not just her life, but her sense of possibility. The Smith home, cleansed of secrecy and tension, became a sanctuary once again. Emily continued her community involvement, deepened relationships with friends who proved loyal, and most of all, rediscovered the simple, honest joys of motherhood and self-respect. She understood that her story would be retold and interpreted 100 different ways. But as she watched the sunrise in her quiet, now peaceful home, Emily knew she had reclaimed her truth and struck a blow not just for herself, but for every person taught to endure in silence. She had chosen the moment, chosen her response, and in doing so, chosen her own future. The climax, the shocking birthday party. As autumn turned to winter in the suburbs of New York, anticipation built for one of the biggest social events on the neighborhood's calendar, John Smith's annual birthday celebration. For years, his parties had become a gathering point, not only for friends and family, but for fellow executives, old college buddies, community leaders, and nearly every neighbor on their street. The Smith household buzzed with preparations, and no one, aside from Emily, had an inkling of what dramatic truths were about to unfold. Preparations behind the scenes. Emily orchestrated the event with her characteristic grace and attention to detail. The house was decorated to the nines, sparkling with strings of soft light, polished silverware, and fresh flower bouquets in shades of gold and cream. The guest list had been carefully curated, the menu taste-tested, and the entertainment booked to please a crowd ranging from elementary school friends to John's corporate colleagues. Every corner of their colonial home exuded warmth and celebration. To observers, Emily seemed the picture of poise, moving through the days prior to the party with a gentle smile, graciously managing caterers and answering questions about the event. To John, she was the supportive wife, planning his favorite evening. He basked in the attention, utterly unaware of the emotional powder keg waiting beneath the surface. Only Emily's closest confidant and her lawyer knew the truth, that beneath every decision about place settings and playlists, Emily was setting the stage for a reckoning that would reverberate far beyond their home. The evening begins. The night of the party arrived brisk and clear. Guests streamed in, wrapped in overcoats and scarves, faces flushed from the cold and excitement. Laughter floated through the open doors. Music trickled through the speakers. John welcomed longtime friends. Jessica, ever the family friend, flitted about, greeting guests and marveling at the decorations. No one saw the way her hands occasionally trembled, nor did they sense the undercurrent of anxiety she tried to disguise with carefully controlled laughter. Emily flowed from room to room, her composure never wavering. She checked on Ethan, who was eagerly presenting magic tricks to the younger children, monitored the kitchen, and made small talk with the neighbors. But in her mind, she mentally rehearsed what was to come, every detail, from the technological setups to her script for that pivotal moment, had been checked and rechecked. She waited for the clock to strike the appointed hour. An unforgettable toast. After dinner, as dessert platters arrived and glasses were topped off, guests gathered in the living room for toasts. John stood at the center, surrounded by friends and colleagues offering warm accolades. Jessica, standing beside John, gave a charming but oddly nervous speech, thanking everyone for their friendship and neighborly spirit. Finally, Emily tapped her glass, drawing a hush over the crowd. She stood in the center of the room, the glow from the chandelier catching in her hair, calm but determined. People leaned in, many expecting a lighthearted anecdote or a heartfelt thank you. I want to thank everyone for making this night so special for John and for our family, she began, her tone measured. Tonight is a reminder of all the years we've shared and the wonderful community we have around us. She glanced around the room, catching the eyes of those who knew her best. But sometimes, the most important truths are not spoken, or they hide in plain sight, she continued, allowing just a hint of gravity to color her words. And tonight, before we bring the evening to a close, I need to share something that concerns not just our family, but everyone who values trust and integrity. A ripple of uncertainty moved through the guests. John shifted, uncertain. Jessica's smile faltered. The reveal. With practiced calm, Emily walked to the media cabinet and, with a few clicks, connected her laptop to the large television mounted above the fireplace. Silence hung in the room. The only sound was the faint whir of the laptop. What followed was a masterclass in restraint. Images and texts appeared on the screen. First, innocuous messages and calendar notes, then more revealing exchanges between John and Jessica. Snippets of coded language, audio files, muted but unmistakable in their tone. The evidence was methodically presented, each block building upon the last, until even the most obtuse observer could no longer mistake the truth. John and Jessica had carried on an affair, hidden beneath the veneer of suburban respectability. Gasps and shocked murmurs erupted. Some guests covered their mouths in disbelief. Others stared, unmoving, at the screen. John blanched, reaching unsuccessfully for explanations. Jessica's composure shattered as she sank into the couch, eyes wide with disbelief and regret. Emily's hands didn't tremble. She turned to face the room. "I have known for some time," she said quietly. "I chose to let the truth speak for itself tonight. This is not about ruining a birthday, but about ending a lie. For the sake of my child, and for the sake of the honesty I owe each of you, and myself, I could not let this night pass in silence." Reactions and fallout. The fallout was immediate. Some guests exited quietly, offering Emily sad, supportive smiles. Others confronted John directly, their words biting. Jessica, once a fixture in the Smith circle, sat bewildered, surrounded by the silent judgment of old friends. The room, so lively, minutes before, became a crucible in which secrets burned away every last shred of pretense. Emily walked over to Ethan, ushering him out of the room gently, shielding her son from the emotional tempest. She excused herself, gathering a few close friends for comfort and logistical support. Her attorney, who'd attended as a friend, took charge of the evidence and ensured there were no immediate legal issues or outbursts that could endanger Emily or her child. John, left to weather the storm, found himself shunned by many of those whose opinions he valued most. Colleagues looked on him with disgust, community leaders with disappointment. The aftershocks stretched beyond the evening. Business deals quietly dissolved, friendships faded, and his carefully curated image as a model husband and neighbor was sundered forever. Aftermath. A woman transformed by midnight. The house had emptied, only the lingering echoes of what had transpired remaining. Emily bathed Ethan, read him a comforting story, and tucked him into bed, each gesture reminding her of what truly mattered amid the chaos. Alone, she stood by the window, looking out at the starlit yard, her heart pounding, but her spirit lighter than it had been in months. She did not feel triumphant. There was no gloating, no joy in ruin, only relief in the certainty that the hardest part was over. In the days and weeks that followed, the story became the talk of the neighborhood. Some whispered, but more expressed admiration for Emily's strength. She handled the legal fallout with the same composure she'd shown at the party. Dignified, strategic, quietly victorious. Bit by bit, Emily remade her life, clearing away the debris of deception and rediscovering herself in truth, ending, forgiveness, and a new beginning. With the echoes of the birthday party's revelations still rippling through the neighborhood, life for Emily Smith entered a new phase, one not defined by betrayal, but by healing, reflection, and ultimately, forgiveness. The days and weeks after her public unveiling of John and Jessica's affair were heavy with change. But out of upheaval, Emily slowly discovered the strength to shape a future on her own terms. Picking up the pieces. At first, the house felt impossibly quiet. John's presence was beginning to fade. His voice on the phone, the echo of his footsteps down the hallway, even the extra mug by the coffee machine. He moved into a small apartment near his workplace in Manhattan, while Jessica, unable to face the neighborhood's silent condemnation, left town to stay with relatives upstate. Emily was left to navigate the aftermath with Ethan at her side, both of them adjusting to a home suddenly emptier, but filled with a kind of hard-won peace. Neighbors who had witnessed the climactic party responded with hushed support. Close friends brought over meals and helped watch Ethan, understanding instinctively that Emily needed both space and community. At school drop-offs or on her evening walks, Emily received gentle nods and sympathetic smiles, small gestures that reassured her that she was not alone. Legal and emotional resolves. With her attorney's guidance, Emily filed for divorce, and the proceedings moved swiftly. John, shamed by public exposure and racked with guilt, did not contest her right to primary custody of Ethan or her fair share of the marital estate. The settlement, finalized before winter's end, meant Emily and Ethan could stay in their beloved home, the place of so many memories, both joyful and complicated. But the legal closure was only part of Emily's journey. Understanding that bitterness could cast a long shadow over her and her son's lives, she resolved, in quiet moments, not to let anger define her. Therapy sessions provided Emily a safe place to voice her betrayal and to process the layers of loss, not just of a marriage, but of the lifelong friendship she thought she'd had in Jessica. With the help of a skilled counselor, Emily also focused on helping Ethan adjust with compassion and honesty, reframing his understanding of family without diminishing his love for either parent, facing John and Jessica, and choosing forgiveness. It was inevitable that Emily would have to face John, and, eventually, Jessica, again. The first meeting with John, at a coffee shop to discuss Ethan's upcoming birthday, was awkward. John's eyes were ringed with exhaustion, his voice hesitant, remorseful. Emily listened more than she spoke. She told him calmly that above all, Ethan needed consistency and kindness from both parents. "I know sorry doesn't mean much," John said, voice wavering, "but I am. For everything. For not talking to you, for lying, for what I've done to our son. I won't ask you to forgive me, but I'm trying to be better." Emily was surprised to find that her rage had cooled. "Be better for Ethan," she replied. "We're both his parents. That's what matters now." It took longer for Jessica to reach out. Weeks passed. Finally, a letter appeared in Emily's mailbox, the handwriting unmistakable. Jessica's apology was raw and unguarded. She wrote about loneliness, about betrayal of herself as much as her friend, about regrets piling up so high she could barely breathe. The letter asked for nothing, no reconciliation, no reply. That evening, Emily read the letter again and again. Through tears, she realized that holding on to unforgiveness would only tether her to the pain Jessica and John had caused. In a brief, heartfelt text, Emily wrote, "I accept your apology. I wish you peace. Truly. For now, I need distance for myself and Ethan. But I hope someday you find the happiness you couldn't find here." A new rhythm. In the absence of deception and daily tension, Emily and Ethan found a gentler rhythm together. Morning pancakes became a sacred ritual, just for the two of them. Emily started volunteering at the local library and rekindling friendships that had faded during her marriage. For the first time in years, she took up painting, a hobby she'd abandoned, rediscovering color and creativity in canvases that now filled her sunlit kitchen. Mother and son took small adventures, day trips to museums, weekend visits to pumpkin patches, stargazing from the backyard, with thick blankets and mugs of hot cocoa. Emily noticed Ethan's resilience, how quickly the joy of childhood could return when provided with honesty and security. At school conferences and neighborhood events, Emily's reputation grew, not as the woman whose family had imploded in public, but as someone who faced adversity with grace and self-possession. She was approached, privately at first, by other women going through their own trials, who found in Emily a safe, understanding confidant. Letting go and looking forward. Spring arrived, and with it, new beginnings. The trees lining Emily's street burst into bloom, a silent encouragement to start again. Emily signed the final divorce papers, not with a sense of defeat, but as a declaration of freedom. With her finances stable and her emotional wounds slowly healing, she considered her own dreams for the first time in years. She enrolled in an evening course on nonprofit management, hoping to one day support other women in transition. She learned to manage the family's investments, growing in confidence and self-reliance. Forgiveness, Emily learned, wasn't a single act, but a series of decisions. Some small and easy, some painstaking and deeply personal. She forgave herself too, for missing the signs, for trusting too easily, for being human. The pain lingered on occasion, surfacing unexpectedly, but it no longer defined her days. A new story begins. On a quiet Saturday evening in early summer, Emily hosted a small dinner for her closest friends. Candles glowed, laughter filled the kitchen, and Ethan, grinning, performed another of his magic tricks for the group. In that circle of warmth, Emily felt not just content, but grateful. Looking out over her backyard as dusk fell, she understood that her story was not a tragedy, nor a cautionary tale. It was a testament to courage, to vulnerability, and to the extraordinary power of choosing hope over bitterness. Emily knew there would be challenges ahead. Motherhood was never simple, nor was rebuilding a life after loss. But as the night air drifted through the window, she felt a quiet certainty. She and her son would thrive. Healing had begun not with justice or revenge, but with the forgiveness that freed her to truly begin again.